Good afternoon. In the last lecture, we were seeing the tragedy. Here, the next part, that is of the conflict in the serious drama or the tragedy. We have to see conflict is present in almost all serious dramas. A straightforward conflict between God, good man, and bad man may be exciting, but out it comes melodramatic. A conflict between two kinds of good is proper material for tragedy. There is nothing violent when judge punishes a criminal. But if the criminal is found to be in love with the judge's daughter, the judge suffers conflict, and the classical example is Antigone of Cephalus. Here, the conflict in the heroine's mind is between her duty to accord a burial in her to her brother. On the basis of this, Hegel is between her duty to accord burial to her brother. On the basis of this, Hegel considered tragedy as a moral conflict. He thought that the moral and spiritual forces are universal and tragedy deals with them. The validity of his theory is shown in Julius Caesar. The conflict between love and duty has become out of date, and the tragic hero need not to be great person. All European tragedy until 1900 followed the old convention that the tragic hero should be a person raised far above the common level. Far above the common level. Then after we have the idea was that by making the hero larger than the life, we make his fall all more impressive because the collapses of high tower is more inspiring than the fall of the house. When beggars die, there are no comments scenes. The heaven themselves blaze forth death of princes. This idea is not out of date in many ways. Discrimination is still done between man and man in every society. The old saying pride comes before the fall is still active because everyone is endowed with some amount of pride, and when it tends to become in excess, it is resented. God also resents that the Christian and the Jewish thought is that he had put down the mighty from their seat. The Chaucer's monk in his tale defines tragedy. Tragedy is a certain story in which the hero, standing in great prosperity, falls down into misery and ends. It is versified in hexameter. He then tells the stories of such tragic heroes through it. It is Aristotelian. The monk stresses on the pride more than he dwells on human flaw. The idea is common both to Greek and Christian thought that excessive pride is sinful and will ultimately be punished. Hero in the tragedy, that the hero in the tragedy is most of the time is a common man. That is, during last 100 years, the common man is being used as the subject of tragedy. He is considered this is consistent with what has been happening in the real world. On the stage, tragedies have generally been concerned with ordinary people with whom audience or readers can easily identify them. Such are heroes of Ibsen, Shaw, John Osborne, etc. Even when the modern writers choose a classical subject, he is likely to minimize the greatness of the character and bring them down to earth. This is somewhat about the hero who is shown as a common man from hundreds of years. Then we have to turn toward the Shakespeare, that the William Shakespeare's plays, the tragedies do not resemble to the Greek tragedies in all aspects. There is no chorus and no limit in the number of actors, no restrictions for the subject, and no unities, and no reluctance to show violent action on the stage. In fact, the tragic tradition of the tragedy had been established in Europe by the Roman tragic dramatist Seneca and partly from medieval mystery plays, and Shakespeare followed that tradition. Seneca was a popular writer of thrillers. He specialized in stories of revenge. There are killings and bloodshed, and ghosts can become a part of them. Senecan method of dividing the play in 5 acts was followed by Shakespeare and others. Yet Shakespeare's plays are not crude like those of Seneca. Secondly, no one can, even in the Elizabethan time, experts expect that Shakespeare's play should look like those of Greeks. And at last, we have to see Julius Caesar as an example. Despite its title, it is not the tragedy of Julius Caesar but the tragedy of Brutus. He is the tragic hero, good but not too good, and hence we sympathize with him. When Brutus was defeated in Philippi, he ran on the sword. The audience pities his death and agrees with Antony's compliment in the end. All these good qualities prove him to be a man of outstanding moral status. It is not mere accident that he dies, but some of the ideas he conceived wrongly. It is human flaws in him. His argument that Caesar was ambitious could not be proved beyond doubts. On the other hand, Antony convinced the people with proof that men and an incompetent politician that the people of Rome went against him was not the cause of his defeat in the battlefield. The beginning of the 4th act of the Julius Caesar brings the reversal of the situation. Though the murder of the Caesar could not fully be justified, and though success in the battle could not be foretold under any circumstances, Brutus shows his high moral in the battlefield. The Brutus was defeated and had his tragic end because he did not listen to Cassius. The play says that Caesar loved and trusted Brutus, and Brutus violated the bond of friendship. What makes Caesar a tragedy, a great tragedy, is that it deals with the problems of characters and morality that belongs not only to Shakespeare's time or Caesar's time, but to the whole of mankind at all times. It is play of action in every sense of the word and thus illustrates the truth of Aristotle's description of tragedy as an imitation of an action that is important, entire, and of certain magnitude. A great man plays of the 20th century seems to be little more than tedious and ill required. Philosophical discuss ions and the essence of tragedy in action, other basic ideas, the ancient and modern tragedies. This is somewhat the information about the tragedy that is in the Shakespearean dramas, in the Julius Caesar, then how is the hero of the tragedy, then what was the conflict in the tragedy, the history of the tragedy, that is the historical account, then the characters, the tragedy in the Aristotle's writing, these things that we have seen here, and then after we have to move towards what is the classical tragedy, what are the various things associated with the classical tragedies or the practices of the religiousness. Then after the another point, that is of the trilogy, is also we have to discuss, and then after modern tragedy, Aristotle's view on tragedy, Julius Caesar, such things that we have to discuss in case of the tragedy. With this, I conclude. Thank you. Good day.